Flashbacks. Local legends.
Tonight, welcome aboard the great man Barry Solomon's, Norwood's long-standing ground manager of the Norwood Oval. And we thought it was appropriate with Gather Round just happened, and really to probably go through and just give people a bit of an education out there, not only the things for Gather Round, but just upgrades of Oval over the years and things which, Barry and the Norwood staff, and obviously at all other grounds, have had to negotiate and get through. And it's been a big week, Baz. Welcome aboard, mate.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Mate, we'll start. How long have you been at Norwood, and how did you get into curating the lovely Norwood Oval there?
I started at Norwood in 1989. A mate of mine, James Fantasia, who's the current CEO, had a chat with me one day and he said, "How'd you like to work in footy?" And so he set up an interview with Wally Miller. I went down and had a chat with Wall, and that was the beginnings. And so the first year I was there, I did baseball with a guy called John Pearce, who was on the ground at the time. And we built a bit of a relationship, and off we went, and baseball sort of stayed at Norwood from 1990 to 99 in the National League format. And we, as I said, we built that relationship, and in 96, I think it was, Johnny sort of parted company with Norwood, and Glenn Rosser asked me if I was interested in sort of staying on the Oval. So I took it on, and I've been on the Oval ever since.
Baz, on that, I totally understand on a curating side of things that baseball was painful with having the home the pitcher's mound, which was basically pretty much at centre half forward, and then the base marks at various spots on the ground. But I've got to be honest, geez, I miss baseball at Norwood, Baz. It was the home of baseball.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I was never really for it or against it. It was very labour intensive.
Yes.
Right through summer, which coming off the back of you couldn't cope with that now, I don't think, because footy is sort of 12 months of the year now.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
Back in those days, you'd finish footy, you'd go straight into baseball, and you'd be at baseball for 3 months, or can't remember what period it went for. But like you said, a warm summer's night at Norwood, and I mean, there's a few things about baseball I can't talk about, but they were funny.
Oh,
they were extremely
nights.
Fun.
Yeah, look, at one stage, the Kensington Nine were all ex-Norwood High, and I'll be honest, depending on what time of night that game was probably dependent on what we pulled up with the next day. And yeah, there was across the road of the Red Legs Club, and then to the Marrickville and whatever nightclub. Geez, there was some big nights, Baz.
Yeah, that's right. And we had some fun. I mentioned recently about an incident where a bloke wrecked one of the change rooms after being ejected from a game, and he was an American, and he was 130 kilos, I think, and probably I can't remember what height, but he was massive man. They had a guy called Kenny Westlink, who was a team manager. I don't know if you remember.
Yep.
And Kenny, so this bloke gets ejected from the game, and Kenny came up to the office and he said to me, he said, "Barry, listen, we've got a bit of an incident down in the Western Stand. Do you want to come down and have a look?" And I thought, I'll go down there. So I walked down, and I got within about 10 metres of the change room, and I could hear all this banging and clanging. And I thought, shit, that doesn't sound good. So I just peered in, and this bloke was dismantling the room. He pulled cupboards off the wall, snapped the door in half. And Kenny said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm not doing anything. I'm going back to the office."
Captain Courageous, Baz.
Yeah, I said, tell me once the bus is loaded and I'll go down there and survey the damage.
Do you think the baseball at Norwood Oval, I mean, obviously because of the stands and the tradition, obviously, of it being at Norwood Oval, was what made baseball really special at Norwood Oval?
Yeah, I think the stands, the old southern stand.
Yeah.
And, just that amphitheatre type setup. And just the history of the whole place, It was something that was fantastic. But as I said, things move and it's hard to see a place for it now.
Yeah,
Not
that's
that it's,
true.
Not that it's up to me, but it's now with the evolution of football, women's football, the demands are so high that you haven't got that time anymore.
Some of the residents' letters across the road, James may have showed me a couple at one stage, and oh my goodness, just unbelievable. Like, I'm sorry, baseball was there before you bought your house.
Yes.
There, and you just shook your head in disbelief.
Yeah.
So
I think some of those people. Baseball, when I first started doing it, was only, I think it was a couple of nights a week. I can't remember now, but
Wednesday nights was the big night.
Yeah, then eventually it went to like 4 days a week, and they had cannons and they had, music, they had all sorts of stuff. Footy's sort of doing the same now, but not to that degree. But I think originally that's what sort of got them offside was the constant level of noise. And, I grew up with a lot of those people, and so you could sort of understand, but that's the way that sport was evolving.
Yeah.
It's just the way that sport goes. And so,
Let's just cover through, one, how much better drainage is nowadays compared to the old days, like that famous day where we nearly lost Roger James in that in the forward pocket at the
northern end.
Northern end,
Northern end.
Yeah, like that's one of the all-time great photos.
That night, I think North Melbourne played Adelaide at Footy Park. And there was a storm of biblical proportions that night. The night before, might have been the Friday night, and that was a Saturday game. So as soon as the rain came in, back in those days, there was practically no drainage at all at Norwood. And because of the compaction, the constant use of the place, the ground compacted a lot. So if you got rain, heavy rain, it just wouldn't work through the surface. It'd sort of sit there. And so I sort of knew on the Friday night, I thought we're going to be in trouble. And as it turned out, we just got a lot of rain. And but back in those days, I remember I joined a group at Adelaide Oval in the early 90s, and it was sort of loosely run by Les Burdett, Johnny Hawkins, Shane Harris, that crew who are all Adelaide Oval, either tennis club or bowling or whatever. And I met a bloke called Chris Trabilsi who had a verti drain. And I sort of inquired about it, and I found out what it did. And I went to, remember Dave Parkinson?
Yes, the late Dave Parkinson, yep.
I went to Dave Parkinson and I told him about it. And I said to him, we should just try it. Anyway, they sort of thought it's a bit of money. I think at the time it was like $500 maybe, but it was just something that we hadn't done before. So I convinced Dave, and off we went. Chris brought it out. We had a crack. Dave saw it operating, and on from there, the place has been verti drained regularly since 1996, amongst a whole host of other things. But with using a proper drainage sand in conjunction with the verti draining and just regular cutting and a whole host of other things, it's just served us really well.
So just explain to the listeners what the verti drain is. Obviously, we know it's for drainage, but how does it actually work?
It's got spikes that you can vary the depth of the spikes, and it's got a crack on it. So as the spikes are going up and down, it cracks backward and forward underground. Mm-hmm. So it sort of just opens it up deep down as well. And you can vary the depth all the time. And sort of we record the depth so that we know where we're going every time we use it. But as I said, I reckon in conjunction with the drainage sand, that's what transformed Norwood over the years. That was probably the biggest thing. And once we started to get a bit of a handle on it, I mean, the other night, even Saturday night, I think we got a lot of rain in between the gathering, and it didn't concern me at all. I wasn't, sort of thought it'll just go straight through as it did. And on the Sunday, it was perfect.
Oh, look, fantastic, really Nick. It was in great nick for both games, Baz. Something you should be massively proud of, and that we'll come back to that. Going through, so the drainage, let's just explain to people out there, as again, I'm emphasising that the same thing happens at other grounds. So a redevelopment, like the new lights, the Wolf Blast Centre when that was being built, go through some of the stuff there, the changes which happened at the Oval, because, again, emphasising that's happening at other grounds. So just explain that and the challenges, Baz.
Over the years at Norwood. Well, we had, years ago, like people come into the place, you'll get people visit from interstate, and they'll walk in and they go, geez, Norwood hasn't changed in years. But what they don't understand is behind the scenes, there's been massive, massive changes, So when I first started, the bars ran off extension cords along the back fences.
That's right.
And I remember having a chat with Glenn Cooper one day. Not Glenn Cooper, Glenn Rosser. And I said to him, what's happening up on Cooper's Hill is that people are getting pass-outs. They can't get served quick enough. And they're getting pass-outs. They're going up the Norwood Hotel, buying piss and bringing it back. And I said, is there a way that we could look at maybe redoing the bar? And as it turned out, I think he got on to Glenn Cooper and they had a chat. And Jerry Dantokia ended up building the bar. But for the first time, they underground the power services and Cooper's Hill at that stage. I think, I can't remember exactly, but I think on the first night, like it doubled the turnover the first night in that new format. And then there was, you guys would remember the Stobie poles at the southern end.
Yes.
That were installed for, I believe they were installed for baseball originally.
Yep.
So we had the two at the southern end and then we had 4 other towers. And over a period of time, and once again, my memory's failing me a bit, but it would have been in the 90s, I reckon, the towers became unsafe to work on.
Yep.
So especially the ones at the northern end, it just became unsafe to work on. And I met a bloke one day. He did public lighting for the council, and had a bit of a chat with him and told him what we could potentially look at. And he went away, and he came up with the original drawings for the next set of 4 towers. So that went on to the council, I believe, and from there, in 2010, we replaced the light towers, which replaced the old ones, which had been there. Okay, that would have been 50 years at least. So that was the start of something massive, because they were really good looking towers and they served a purpose again. But there was, when we sold the Red Leagues Club, when we created Cooper's Corner outside the RSL.
Yep.
There was obviously a need. Once the Red Leagues Club went down, Norwood people just didn't have anywhere to go on a match day.
Yeah.
So that was the old tractor shed. And
of course it was, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a dead end down there. Like, it didn't see many people. So we gutted it out and rebuilt it into what it is today. And once again, it sort of bounces off Cooper's Hill, gives that both ends of the ground bounce off each other.
Yeah.
So there was that. There was obviously now the Wolf Blast Centre, which is fantastic. And that, that's been, I think, 3 years in the making. It took, when I say 3 years in the making, I think it was 2003 to 2018 or something.
Yeah.
In trying to make it happen, but it was 3 years in the building. And there's been a host of other things along the way, and a lot of them have been. I remember there was a guy at the council, Alan Pickering, that I met in the once again, I think it was in the late 90s. And collectively, we devised a 15-year working plan for the Oval, which meant the restoration of the southern grandstand roof,
Yes.
the eaves, the gutters, all that sort of thing, the rails on the western grandstand on the front walkway, the renaming, the Sir Edwin Smith nameplate on the grandstand and the fascia on the western grandstand. So there, amongst a host of other things that went on. And that was quite good, because it kept everyone in line. We had our obligations, they had their obligations, and it was brilliant,
And was there an upgraded sprinkler system there as well, in amongst that?
Sorry, mate. I've been sick all day, so I'm a bit hazy.
It's okay.
1970, I think it was, the first irrigation system went in, and it was like in 1970, it was state of the art. I think it was one of the first irrigation systems of that type. Cut a long story short, in the mid 90s, I found a bloke, and his name was Jim Lawler. Anyway, I think he was in a nursing home at the time. Anyway, I had a chat with him, and he said, "My God," he goes, "don't tell me it's still there." That was in the 90s. So over the years, Bob Dawson, Smokey Dawson, used to patch it up, and we'd put Band-Aids on it and try and keep it going. And then, but once footy became really intense and you were going at it 12 months of the year, we thought, shit, we've got to do something, because it's just the spacings of the sprinklers were 21 metres apart. And so you'd have to judge wind at night quite often. Like you judge it either way, whether it was windy or not windy, to try and make sure that you got a cover. So I had a chat with the boys at the council, and once again they acted on it. And last year, I think it was 2021, might have been 2021, they replaced it all. And so it's fantastic now. The spacings now, I think, are 15 metres apart. So there's good coverage. The sprinklers are opposing nozzles, so you're getting cover right around as they rotate. And I think once again that's been significant in helping the grass to really harden up, and
And just on that too, Baz, I'm just thinking of when the building was doing for the Wolf Blast Centre. I'm thinking of all the wires which are around, and of how much stuff you guys had to do. I reckon at one stage we had to make sure that the ditch was being done in the right spot, and had to move it to some degree, and just things like that, which people would have no idea how much work goes on behind the scenes.
As I said, Mel, look, some of the stuff is hazy to me, really. I just remember that there was so much going on, and we were trying to run a footy season in amongst it. So and you had to. There were people who said you should shut the ground down, but it's impossible. You can't. We had to play footy. But there were just so many things. I mean, I think the thing that sticks in my mind is for the last 3 or 4 years, there's hardly been a day when there hasn't been noise of some description.
Yeah.
Or someone ringing at 6 o'clock in the morning wanting access to something. And I said to my wife the other day, I said, the Monday after the gather round was the first day since December the 16th that I hadn't arrived at Norwood to see people everywhere.
Yeah.
And so it was beautiful. It was so peaceful. But that was probably the thing that stuck in my mind. And then behind the scenes, like you said, all the stuff that goes on that people aren't aware of, it's just amazing, because the ground's 122 years old.
Yeah.
So it's really old, Then over the years, there's been a lot of patching up and a lot of stuff that's gone on that people weren't aware of. So you find stuff all the time, and then you've got to make sure that whatever changes you're making are compliant, and it's fascinating.
So leading on to, obviously, the AFLW comes to Norwood Oval. How much lead time did you get for that to prepare the oval and the facilities there?
The AFLW, I reckon the first time around, 2017, I think it was.
Yeah, the first game was the Crows in Brisbane. Was the first game.
And I reckon we had a bit of time up our sleeve back then. But once again, footy doesn't stop, really. So you're always trying to balance things. And it's a credit this time around to all the different football departments with this gather round that everyone just hung tough. And, you know, there were people offshore everywhere. You know, they were shipping them out, training at different places. So it's a credit to everyone, not just Norwood, but all the other facilities that allowed us to train and, you know, backed it in and whatever. But the AFLW, that was interesting. That first Brisbane-Adelaide game, I reckon we had 13,500.
Yeah.
And it was a fair buzz. But, you know, that's what happens. We're always trying to balance out what we're doing and, you know, trying to provide the best. I remember, to be honest with you, I said to a group of kids a couple of weeks ago, the thing that really got me going on the oval was one day Matthew Kelly was a Crows listed player.
Reckless,
and he got hurt at Norwood.
Against Stir,
on a really unstable part of the ground. And it was bad, you know, he got pretty badly hurt. And and from that day on, I sort of looked and I thought, I never want that to happen again, not to anyone, you know, but to see someone's career impacted and whatever.
He slipped under Corey Gray because Corey played for uni, so I'd spoken about it with Corey at length, and he said he nearly vomited on the spot with just seeing Matty's leg. Yeah.
But, you know, back in those days, man, I mean, you guys remember how the ovals all were.
Yeah.
You know?
It was just very boggy.
Yeah, it was just accepted that that's how it was. And, you know, it's just very... And the shame of it is that when it's wet, it's not too bad. But once it dries up, it's a whole new ballgame because the ground becomes hard and there's nothing you can do with it.
Oh, the ground's just everywhere. I think back playing for Adelaide Uni, a game at Adelaide Lutheran on West Terrace. One of our guys kicked the ball and his boot came off, and we turned around. We couldn't find his boot ever again. It had sunk in. No one ever found his boot. Wow. You think of that compared to the league grounds, like you know, it just everywhere was. Uni Oval used to absolutely. It was terrible, and it stunk to train on. But from the whiff from the Torrens at 5 o'clock, it was worse at training than it was game time. And I just think no. Nowadays, anyone complaining about a ground, they've got no idea. Like there was a bit of carry on last year at Norwood where Baz, we were just so unlucky to cop the wet weather where that state primary school's carnival was on. And there was a bit of carry on with the game against Glenelg, realistically. The Oval was still in bloody good nick. It was ridiculous.
Look, mate, we run a sizable football program.
Exactly.
That goes for a fair portion of the year. And the last year was just a combination of some really wet weather and a massive workload. And in the end, it just happened that it got to that point of the year where there was going to be a tipping point. And you know, but at the same time, the ground never, as bad as it looked, it still drained.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there were moments where it was wet, where it was raining. But after that, I remember in 2010, 2011, we were coming up to a baseball final series and I was sort of advised. So what happened was the baseball final series was going to be telecast in America on whatever it's called. What's their sporting channel there? They were going to telecast it live into the States. And Pat Kelly was the general manager at the time of the Bite. Anyway, we had a chat with Pat Kelly and we wanted to make it look $1 million. Anyway, and it was my fault. I got a bit too cute and we over fertilised, and we just suddenly all the things that we didn't want to happen happened. It just so it just turned bad, and the ground just completely packed up in the following season. And I remember Keith Thomas came out one day and he goes, "What do you think we should do?" And this was early in the season, and I said to him, "Mate, there's nothing. There's nothing we can do. All we can do is just hold on and hope that we get some good luck, you know." And, as it turned out, Norwood played North, and it was probably round 15.
Yeah.
And it was a live telecast. And that Friday night, so it was a Saturday game, on the Friday night, it poured all night. And the ground was already like it was last year against the Bays. It was already in that sort of state. Yeah. Anyway, so on the Saturday morning, we had just before the reserves game, we had another 10 mil. Then we had 5 during the game. And you could have built the ark. And, it was bad, really bogged up. But in the reserves game, I think it was 15 goals to 10. And in the league game, I think it was 17 goals to 12 or something.
Yeah.
So the ground actually drained. And in the last quarter, one of the Norwood blokes bounced up the wing, was taking bounces. So I looked and I thought, as bad as it was, the old girl, these days, it just responds, we do all the right things, the best that we can possibly do, given the environment that we work in, but it always responds, I love it.
And
I love it.
On to gather around this year that finally was, probably a bit more assistance by AFL, and so there was a bit more funds around than what there's obviously is normal. So how often were you're fertilising, how often were you mowing? You seem to be mowing it just about every day, Baz.
It was, in the end, it was 4 days a week.
Yeah.
Four cuts a week. And the AFL were fantastic. They engaged the boys at Adelaide Oval to pop out and give us a hand. So, they were incredible, like Damien Hoff, Todd Heinrich and Caleb Hearn. And they spent a bit of time out there, especially over that last month. So, as you can imagine, coming up to the gather round, everyone was just under the pump. I think one day I had something like 140 calls for the day, and it was just insane. I'd never worked in an environment like that. It was mad, but so rewarding. And the fact that the Adelaide Oval boys came out, it was brilliant, because we learnt so much off them. And they weren't hiding any secrets, they were sort of full of knowledge. And so, a lot of it you can attribute to that and the AFL and Norwood, like the fact that everyone wanted to drive in the same direction. And as I said, the impact on Norwood, we're still trying to run a season.
Yes.
And it was a credit to James to twig to everyone that everyone just held their nerve. And we, as much as that, I'm sure there were some days where, everyone wanted to kill each other, but we hung on, and I think in the end it actually worked out all right.
How much lead time did you get from the AFL in preparing? Because the state government only had about 5 months to sort of get this all organised in. How soon did you guys find out that it was going to be Norwood Oval as a host venue? Well,
what happened was I think originally we were notified that we were in the hunt.
Yeah.
I think, but in November we changed the light towers. So we had a refit of all brand new light towers going over to LED. So we come off the grand final win and we went straight into the light tower project. So the ground was already under the pump at the end of the season, had a brilliant grand final victory, went into the light tower project, and then straight after the light tower project, at that stage we knew that it was on and that we didn't have much time to really start to turn things around. So it was just full hammer,
And the light tower thing was a huge job. Again, people just don't notice that. All of a sudden there's lights up. Oh, that's different. Well, they have no idea how much goes on to make sure that happens.
Well, the unique thing about Norwood, you can't access anything without being on the ground.
Mm.
And because of the cost of flooring an oval to protect it, it's just a massive cost. So they went in el natural, really, and unfortunately we had, I think there was 20 out of 30 days it was wet.
Yeah.
But again, with everything that's happened, it's an absolute credit to everyone that everyone did the best that they could possibly do, you know.
And how good did the old girl look in the end, Baz, and how rightly you were grinning like a Cheshire cat last weekend, and so you bloody should have been, mate.
I think it was just a collective effort, and behind the scenes to know what had actually gone on and where we'd come from to arrive at that. I remember the first time the AFL popped out to have a look, I think they sort of just looked and thought, this is pretty horrific, you know. But the fact that we were able to, as a group, turn it around, and it was so rewarding and so satisfying because of where we'd come from, you know, the time frames. I mean, there was a whole lot of stuff. There was the rebuild of the main canteen at the southern end, which meant that was a building site for 3 months. There was the refit of the coaches' boxes in the western stand. You know, there was power cuts. There was all sorts of stuff. So you had 2 building sites, and you had a ground that needed desperate work. And then on top of that, everything else that went on. And I think the funny part about it is, like, people turn up to an AFL game and they watch the game and they go, but they don't realise behind the scenes the signage, the grass art, people involved at all the different levels, scaffold people, and it's crazy.
I thought with the crowd there, Baz, I just thought we should have locked everyone in, mate, not allowed anyone to go.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. It was a good weekend.
Oh, it was.
Did you get 5 minutes to sit back and actually watch some of the footy on the weekend?
Yeah, I went. I sort of got the girls a position up in the southern stand, my girls, and so for a period there, I think it was on the Sunday Arvo, I went up there and just sat with my daughter, and just had a look, and it was great, to see that sort of vibe, and I mean. Just a massive thank you to the government and to the AFL, to the Norwood Council.
But you had to put up with Will Bakewell in the grandstand up there with you, mate. So that was a pretty big significant out with you. G'day, Will. I'm sure you'll enjoy your mention there.
Where was that? What was that?
I'm just saying with your daughter, with Will Bakewell on a Sunday. So, that was a big commitment by you as well, mate. So, touche, Will.
William.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, no, but I mean, and the board of the footy club, the board, just fantastic that they had the faith, because there were days where I'm sure they looked and thought, maybe this is a bridge too far, but they held firm, and as I said, it was just brilliant to see the whole state pull together.
Oh, it was fantastic. And that was the thing with me, Baz. I don't think there would be a supporter from a club I didn't speak to last weekend. I spent a fair bit of time at the footy bit in Elder Park and all that, and it was just awesome. Look, I'm not an AFL person. I'm far more an SANFL person, but it was absolutely awesome to finally have something which wasn't Victorian-centric and be here and appreciate it. And the atmosphere it was just like the inaugural Grand Prix, and we're going to cover it again a bit later on, and it was just fantastic.
Yeah, it was. If Impey had scored that goal, that last goal, I reckon the place would have exploded.
Yeah, because it was a pro. And to our credit, and to you, Baz, Hawthorn have already requested to play again at Norwood Oval next year. So hopefully that does help us keep at least one game.
Yeah, that'd be good. I think. As I said, I can't ever remember a time when there was such a good feeling and people were. Even in the turf industry, guys all texting each other at Mount Barker. Mount Barker, Matty Sampson at Unley. Everyone just texting each other. Is everyone all right? How you all going? And it was fantastic, that just everyone bonded together.
And
And
I think
just
that's a
wanted to
key
get
point,
good result.
Baz. It's a really important point. Exactly that. Everyone bonded together. It was a unique atmosphere. You know,
A unique experience
And
really,
even
yeah.
look, I actually went out to Unley for the Collingwood training on Saturday morning. Got asked upstairs to Sturt's new facility, which is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And yeah, just things like that. It was just a goodwill vibe with so many things.
Yeah. I as I said, it's just a massive. We're just blessed that we were given the opportunity, I think.
And if we hopefully we keep it next year, and hopefully, therefore, I would say that the canteen at the scoreboard end gets the same treatment as the canteen did at the other end would be fantastic. So we'll wait and see on that one.
Yeah.
Mate, we have to ask, there's probably some games that stick out in your mind. Let's start with the baseball. Is there one particular baseball game that sticks out for you over the years?
I think there were numerous things that happened in baseball. One night, Tony Harris handed me a bat and put me on home plate and threw a few balls to me, and I didn't hit one. I didn't hit one ball. And he was only just lollipopping him, and I said to him, mate, there's something going on here. But anyway, that stood out. So that showed me that I wasn't a baseballer. And then there was a final one night, and there was a guy called Craig Watts.
Yes, Goodwood Saints footballer. Yes. Big, burly. Yep.
Yeah. And so I reckon he was a lefty.
Yes, correct.
And so the bases were loaded maybe, and it was the end. It was in the ninth innings, and Adelaide needed a run to win. And Watts has stepped up and he's pumped this ball down the Western grandstand line, and it went over the home run fence and it bounced in the driveway, and I think might have even hit the wall of the RSL, which is a massive hit. And Adelaide got up. There was that. There's some of the personalities in baseball were fantastic over the years.
And then obviously we'll split the next question into two here. The SNFL, some key highlights from the SNFL days.
I reckon the SNFL, there was a Norwood North game, and myself and Gavin Goodfellow were in the race. We were at the southern end in the tunnel, I think, and it was coming on half time, and there was all this commotion, and there's a guy called Christian O'Brien.
Yes, windscreens. Yep.
Yeah, big Obi. You know, we saw Obi pumping. His legs were pumping. He was going 100 mile an hour, and he's running towards the race. And I thought, maybe he's got to go to the toilet. But in the bottom of the race, it was on. And you remember, you probably both remember it. It was a massive blue in the race, in the players' race.
I certainly remember the Norwood West one with Bodie and Collins.
And I remember the Norwood Centrals one down the southern end,
Yeah, Norwood Centrals. I remember a game and that was another one, was Norwood Centrals in 2000, when Centrals were making their run to their first premiership. And it was on a Friday night, and David Walker, I think, was the general manager, and South were playing West at Adelaide Oval. And so a lot of the cops went to Adelaide because I think they got better sandwiches and whatever. So here we were. I think we had just under 10,000 people Friday night. Central's making a run for it. And I think traditionally Central's had come to Norwood and win the early game in the year. And then in the latter part of the year, Norwood would always run over them. But that night, Central's came from behind, and I was standing in the Western Tunnel, and I saw a flare go off in the Southern Grandstand. It was like an orange flare. And I remember I got in contact with Walkie and I said, hey, mate, listen, I don't feel good about this. I reckon it just felt bad. Like it felt like
something was going to go wrong, yeah.
Yeah. So I rang the cops and just said, look, I think there's, maybe better have a presence out here. So I went out in the Southern car park. Before that, there was a 44-gallon drum. We used to have these 44-gallon drums up on Cooper's Hill. And this 44-gallon drum got lobbed through the air. And a father put his kid out in the pocket while the play was on. And I looked and I thought, that is unusual to land your kid out on the field while the play's on.
Wow.
Anyway, so I went out to the Southern car park to meet the cops, and the car turned up, and this one bloke got out with two girls. And I remember saying to him, is this it? Like, it's just the three of you? Yeah, we're right. Show us where the problem is. So I thought, all right. So I walked them around to the main canteen at Gate 1, and they got just to the start of the ramp, and they've looked up on Cooper's Hill. And on Cooper's Hill, there was Dennis McIntosh, George Dantokia. It was frightening. Anyway, they just got to the start of the ramp, and this copper's grabbed his radio and his breaker. You can tell straight away. they called for the reinforcements straight away. But it was on. It was completely on. And Central's got up and won. And I think Scott Lee maybe climbed up a point post at the end of the game. And the Central cheer squad were just going berserk. But atmosphere, it was incredible atmosphere. Maybe not supported these days by people, but the atmosphere was electric, you know.
And then obviously the AFL, obviously the first AFLW game there, and obviously Gather Round would probably be the two highlights.
Oh, I can think of a grand final where a Payneham Norwood Union's Salisbury grand final. Baz, probably we can discuss a little bit of it. Probably 90% of it can't go to air, but we can probably discuss 5%. And a previous guest on our show, Brett Zorsey, may have been handy that night.
But to sort of back that up, that was years ago.
Yeah.
And I know that the whole game and sport in general has changed now. A lot of things are not acceptable. That wasn't acceptable then.
No.
But you sort of look at it and think, for me personally, I look back over the years at all the moments, and I think I don't regret anything, and I just look at it and I think it was just part and parcel of what went on.
I think back to that day. I actually, in some ways, regard that as Gary McIntosh's greatest hour, that he very, very firmly went to Payneham. There'd be no retaliation and no thing in it. If Macca hadn't done that, I actually think that would have ended up as
got out of control.
I think it would have been the biggest brawl ever at footy in South Australia.
Yeah, it would have been a complete riot, without a doubt. But Macca, you're right. Yeah, to deliver that message that it doesn't matter what happens, play the ball, and I think they ended up winning by 145 points.
It was ridiculous.
And I know I shouldn't say this, but what stood out in my mind about that was in the last quarter, Payneham had a full forward, or one of the forward line players, and they were up by 130 points, I think it was. He kicked a goal, he ran to the Cooper's Hill pocket, and he sculled a beer. Like his mates were on the hill. And he sculled this beer, he got back on the lead and took another mark and kicked another goal. So it all happened without a break, without a pause. Just sculled the beer, got back on the lead, took a mark, kicked another goal.
Welcome to local footy.
Oh, that was probably one of the mild things to happen that day too, Baz. Yeah.
But as I said before, you can't condone stuff and whatever, but stuff happens, and I look back on it, and I'm 60 now, and I look back on it and I think I've been absolutely blessed over the years to be involved in something that means so much to so many people at every different level, and
that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, just it's something that turns people around, and I mean, even we use a bloke on the scoreboard at junior games, I think he still does it.
Yeah.
And that guy is just respected by everyone. Everyone treats him well. He's autistic, and they treat him well, and he's loved. And he performs a service. He goes up there. And I remember, I won't name him, I don't think, but one day there was an amateur grand final, and the Crows were playing West Coast, so it was probably around 2005, 2006. They were playing West Coast in a prelim at Footy Park. And this bloke, the game ended, and the Crows and West Coast had a later finishing time. So the amateurs finished, and it was nearing dark at Norwood. And then he's up on the scoreboard, and he's updating the AFL scores.
That's right.
Point for point in the dark. And the families who were waiting for their kids, they're just looking at me and go, what's the story with this bloke? And I said, oh, he's just in the moment, he's sort of he's got it all happening. So, there.
Well, mate, but we have to say thank you for preparing not a fantastic ground at Norwood Oval, but in general the gather round really brought out the best in the old girl, 122 years old, and she looked at her peak, really.
Well, I just, once again, it had less to do with me and a lot more to do with a lot of other people, No. I just played a role, but there was
Baz, take your hour. Take your hour, mate. Thank you. Thank you. That's the words to be spoken, Baz.
No worries, boys. All right. Thanks for the chat.
Thanks, Baz.
Thank you for joining us and giving us your insights into a bit of turf care at the Norwood Oval.
No worries.
Thanks, Baz.
Good luck.
Thank you, mate.
Sure.
Bye.
See you.